Today's video is sponsored by Pixpa. About 10 years ago, I got back into shooting film, which reinvigorated my love for photography. This in turn helped me take my work to the next level. It also inspired the start of this channel. One of the first cameras I took on this journey was the Nikon Fe, a camera that I still use today. So as soon as I heard of the new ZF's release, I had to get my hands on one, try it, and answer some questions. What sets this camera apart? And how does it stack up to the film shooting experience? When I used to work at a camera store, I would often look at my Nikon Fe and say, why can't they make full-frame digital cameras that look and feel like this? I mean, this is an SLR and it was made 30 years ago or more, and now we have it. Others have come close, but have usually been crop sensors. The ZF full-frame sensor gives you the big advantage of opening up more options for lenses and focal lengths. The compact size and classic styling make it unobtrusive and versatile. The look and feel make you want to pick it up and use it. So one of the best things about the ZF is just that ability to use it the way that you want. You can chuck on a small lens like one of these Z primes and have a nice compact setup to use much the way that you would an equivalent size film camera. And it just gives you that versatility to switch between different shooting modes. I've always thought that Nikon made some of the best cameras in this period, and the styling of the ZF is completely reminiscent of that era. I'm not sure if it's only people like me or of a certain age group that find this particular style appealing, but let me know in the comments what you think of the design choice. I was able to gratefully borrow a unit from Nikon Australia for a week or so, which is back with them now. I'll be giving my honest opinion on what I think of the camera as a whole, and this video wasn't sponsored by them. As usual, I'll be focusing more on the practical side of things more than the technical. This video is broken down into different chapters, including street photography, adapting vintage lenses, film scanning with the pixel shift feature, and so on. So first of all, I just want to go through some reasons why you might choose to buy a Nikon Zf. Number one would be if you want a high-performance full-frame digital camera of fairly compact size. Secondly, you don't want to spend as much as the flagship full-frame cameras from most brands. The ZF comes in at 3,500 Australian or 2,000 US dollars at launch, which is less than other cameras with comparable specs. And three, if you prefer manual dials and controls and don't mind the flippy screen. Next reason is if you like the look and feel of vintage film SLRs, the ZF certainly fulfills that with the classic style, magnesium body, and brass dials. There's also a range of colors. I was loaned a grey unit for this video. Next, if you like adapting manual lenses and the idea of having in-body stabilization with those lenses and other features like eye tracking and focus confirmation. Or if you're a street photographer and want to shoot full frame with other bonuses like being able to adapt Leica M lenses at their intended focal length. Next, if you want a camera with great video capability either as a bonus or even one of the main uses for it. And lastly, if 24 megapixels is plenty of resolution for you, but you like the option to use pixel shift shooting for up to 96 megapixels. This is great if you digitize your own film, for example. Of course, there's more, but these are some of the things that stand out to me when I look at it compared to similar cameras like my Canon R6. There are reasons and situations why I might still prefer that camera, but I'll go into those later in the video. I think everyday photography is where a camera like this really shines. It's not overly large, it looks nice, and it has a range of lens options and features to suit the situation. The lack of a large grip might be an issue for some with the classic design, but there are already options like the small rig add-on grip, allowing you to either retain the small classic form factor or add a grip for comfort. And I do like that it at least has that minimal grip protrusion compared to something flat, like the Fe for example. You get in-body vibration reduction and great battery life. It really does look like a film camera, which draws a different type of attention compared to something like a Nikon Z8 or most full-frame digitals. I can imagine it being a popular one-and-done solution for enthusiast photographers who like to travel and shoot daily life stuff. As expected, the image quality is great from this sensor. The RAW files hold a lot of dynamic range if you like to edit, and if you don't, the JPEG processing is nice too. It recovers highlight and shadow detail during JPEG processing, depending on the profile that you choose. The color profiles provide plenty of options if you do prefer to shoot JPEGs, and you can tweak them to your liking. Another focus of the ZF is black and white photography. Nikon's decision to place a dedicated physical switch to go into black and white mode shows this. If you're like me and love black and white photography, this alone might sweeten the deal. Of course, all it does is switch into the chosen monochrome profile that you've set up, as you might with other cameras, but having the dedicated switch, that shortcut, and some really nice monochrome profiles gives you that extra incentive. So although having this little switch to go to black and white might seem trivial, you can kind of underestimate how lazy we can be, and just that little bit of reduction of friction means that you're more likely, at least I find myself much more likely to just flip that switch, it's right there near your thumb, just to get an idea of how the scene would look like in black and white. It's just that one or two less steps that makes you that much more likely to switch into the black and white mode if you're someone who likes to use that kind of feature. Helps you compose in a certain way, get an idea of how it would look like in black and white as opposed to color. It might influence the way you shoot the scene. So I think it's a nice little feature, and if you're someone who loves to shoot black and white film, for example, having it on a camera like this is a nice touch. The autofocus on this camera was super fast and has a lot of tracking options, and I personally found the menu and interface to be intuitive. Alright, now let's talk about using this camera like you might do a film camera. First of all, having a screen that's easy to hide away might incentivize a lot of shooters to do so. The fact that you have all the controls visible means you don't need the screen for much once you've set everything up and developed your usage habits. Even if you're using an AF lens, you have this dedicated little display for the chosen aperture. The electronic viewfinder is high quality and it can be customized to display the way you want it to. Now, touching back on shooting JPEGs, you have the dedicated monochrome switch and Nikon's creative picture control. This allows you to essentially build your own color profiles, or film simulations, so to speak. Having shot Fuji X cameras, I can say that Fuji wins in this department. However, I'm already starting to see some film recipes for the Z cameras on sites like Fuji X Weekly. This should improve over time as more users create and share their recipes. And hopefully some future updates will open up even more in-camera customization powers. The next big advantage is the ability to adapt a huge range of vintage lenses to the ZF. Since it has a full-frame sensor, lenses maintain their original focal length, and you just have more options. Whether you go with old Nikon lenses, M42, Minolta, Leica M lenses, there are a whole range of adapters of varying price and ability out there. Overall, how does it actually feel in usage compared to a film camera? I can't give a definitive answer to that, as it's too subjective. But to put that into a relatable perspective, it feels as close as any of the Fuji X cameras, even more so in some ways. I'm not talking about the output from the simulations and such, but the practical and experience side of things. It's modeled exactly after a film camera. The only other cameras that do this are the modern Leica Ms that I can think of. However, the ZF is much more accessible. Additionally, adapting old lenses is one of the best tools you have to give your photos and videos a vintage look. One thing that would have been nice is if the SE prime lenses had aperture control on the lens itself. Again, this is subjective, but I prefer having a lens ring to control the aperture as opposed to using a small control dial. The ZF is clearly going to compete with the Fuji X line in some way, and just this little feature could be decisive for some users. But with this camera being full frame, at least you have way more options when it comes to adapting lenses. There's even a range of Z-mount lenses from Voigtlander, which I feel would perfectly pair up with this camera for the manual experience if that's what you're after. So the ZF has a whole lot of bells and whistles, and at the end of the day, it's a modern mirrorless camera. There's no fake film advance, lack of LCD screen, or other major gimmicks. It lets you use it the way you want to, and if that means leaning into the analog way of shooting, you can do that. If you want to shoot JPEGs on a low capacity SD card with the screen hidden, manual lenses, and diffusing filters, go for it. I've gone into techniques that help simulate some of the film look in a separate video, but for now, I'd like to quickly mention the sponsor of this video, which is Pixpa. Pixpa is the easy all-in-one website builder for creatives. You can have your own place on the web to showcase your work with a built-in online store, blog, or even client galleries to deliver images to clients in a professional manner. I personally can't deal with coding and complexity when it comes to these things, so I love that Pixpa has a wide range of great templates. I've tried other website builders before, but have found Pixpa to offer the best value, service, and features to suit my needs as a content creator. That's why I've been using them for years now and was the one to reach out to them to sponsor the channel. I used to pay separate fees for client galleries and a website, and now it's under one roof and saves me time and money. You can find a plan to suit your own requirements and just pay for what you need. There's also a 15-day free trial and a discount on your first year if you sign up using my link in the description. So give it a try and see what you think for yourself. So as I've touched on, one of the big draw cards is the huge range of Nikon F-mount lenses that can be adapted to the ZF. They're affordable, perform well, and are easy to find. Many of them also have electronic contacts. So if you use the Nikon adapters, these lenses can communicate aperture data. Manual focus lenses can also give you focus confirmation, meaning the focus point turns green when you catch focus. This works extremely well and is a big deal in my opinion. It's less distracting than using focus peaking, although you can use that too. Another huge bonus is having the in-body vibration reduction on F lenses. Even though it reduces to 3-axis stabilization, that's still a big advantage. There is another great feature that this camera introduces, which is the ability to use eye and face tracking in manual focus. This means you can have a vintage lens and it can track something like a subject's eye, and when you punch in, the viewfinder will automatically magnify over that spot, allowing you to quickly find focus without having to move the focus point yourself. I tried lenses like my Voigtlander Nocton 58 1.4 and the classic 105 Nikkor lens with these features, and it made them that much more usable on digital. One drawback of adapting Nikon F lenses to Z, however, is the size of the adapters. This is due to the big difference in the original 46.5mm flange distance and the super short 16mm of the Z mount. Simply put, this can add a lot of length and perceived size to many old prime lenses once adapted. Whether you use a cheaper dummy adapter or an official one with electronics, this is just the nature of the situation, since the F lenses were designed for old SLRs. Also, you may need to use the front dial to electronically change the aperture with chipped lenses. This was the way that they worked on old Nikon DSLRs, meaning you need to put them at max aperture and use the control dial to click through f-stops. This can be good or bad depending how you look at it. But if you're using older lenses like this 28 AIS for example, you can control the aperture using the ring on the lens as usual. So my advice is to do your own research and consider the factors I've mentioned when you're deciding to buy vintage lenses or adapters. Sometimes there's no worthwhile difference in output to warrant the extra size and weight, and an equivalent SE lens with autofocus might be the way to go. You can see in this example of the SE 28mm lens and the 28 AIS, which was adapted and becomes twice the size and weight almost, there's really not much noticeable difference in the image output. Other lenses might be a different story, however. I feel like a lot of people will be intending to buy a ZF with street photography in mind. It's a full frame camera of compact size with rugged build, direct controls, and an unintimidating design. Autofocus is super reliable, but you also have a range of options when it comes to third-party and vintage lenses. Everything I've gone over in the video so far applies to using the ZF for street, but extra factors to consider here would be things like the flippy screen, especially if you like to use the LCD to compose from a high or low angle. This type of screen is not as quick to deploy as something like the Fuji X Pro that you can just quickly flip down for chest or waist level screen angles. Another factor is the shutter sound, which is no problem in my opinion. It's quiet and pleasing like most mirrorless cameras. You also have an electronic shutter option if you need it. And as I've alluded to, you can rig the camera out the way that you prefer in terms of lenses, grip, and screen orientation. So even though I didn't try it, I hear that adapting Leica M lenses works really well and the adapters are compact and cheap. My friend Cooper is using the combo on his ZF and tells me that it works great. So head over to his YouTube channel, as I'm sure he'll eventually share his findings over there. So I'm really loving the experience of the ZF for street photography, having the manual controls, the small
compact, classic form factor with the little prime lenses, with these compact prime lenses like the Z 28mm, the 40mm, the 26 Pancake's another good option, and everything just feels really intuitive for shooting street. Of course, you could choose to adapt some old vintage lenses, especially from Nikon. There's a huge range of great lenses, but I feel like for street, having autofocus is one of the main advantages of getting a system like this, of getting a full frame digital camera. But with those old lenses, you have a long focus throw. They're designed for SLRs. I was never big or very good at using an SLR for street photography. So I still think for street, at least, using the actual Z lens is going to give you the best experience. But of course, it's great to have the option to adapt those old lenses. And you could always go with maybe adapting Leica M lenses if you can get the adapter. I didn't manage to get one in time. I didn't borrow this camera for long enough, unfortunately, to do that. So that's something I would have loved to have tried, but unfortunately I didn't get the time. Either way, I'm liking what I'm experiencing with the ZF.
I even tried some low light shooting at night and found both auto and manual focus lenses very usable. It's really nice being able to use manual primes with the great EVF and focus assist options. I was able to get sharp handheld shots at really low shutter speeds, allowing me to keep the ISO down and the tripod at home. Let's touch a little on video here without going into too much detail. Long story short, the video out of this camera is really nice, and you have a bunch of advantages like the in-body vibration reduction, good options for resolution and frame rates, and the ability to record internal 10-bit and log files, which is great if you like to do serious work or edit your videos. And you have onboard necessities like a mic jack, HDMI port, and so on. One little thing I didn't like is the fact that it has a heavy crop when you shoot at 50 or 60 frames in 4K. This might not be an issue for many users, but if you're like me and do weddings or commercial gigs where you rely on slow motion, having this crop might be a bit annoying or limiting. So what about the camera for professional photography and work overall? It's definitely usable and might even be ideal for some. But personally, I would still prefer something with modern ergonomics and controls for the speed and comfort advantages. There's good reasons why camera design evolved over the last decades, and simple things like the grip, weight, ergonomics, or even just having a joystick become more important when shooting professionally. So it should be fairly obvious that the main target demographic of the ZF isn't most professional shooters, but it might work out great for some. Certain wedding shooters, for example, love that classic form factor, smaller size, and aesthetic appeal of cameras like this, or Fuji X or Leica, and it could make a great B-cam to something like a Z8, given the great value and performance that you get. I mean, there's a whole lot packed in for the price, like pixel shift shooting and dual card slots. Speaking of pixel shift, this brings me to the next test, which was using the camera for digitizing film. I think it makes a great option for a few reasons. It's fairly compact for a full frame camera and has the direct controls, which are nice when you're working on a copy stand. Additionally, you have a lot of options for macro lenses. The Nikon micro lenses are quite popular even on other bodies for scanning film because they're cheap, readily available, and have great performance. I only had access to the 60mm AF micro, but did some test scans using the regular and pixel shift shooting. Pixel shift is easy to set up, and you can choose to lock the mode in to do a sequence of shots. Personally, I find 24 megapixels enough for most purposes, but having the higher res options is great when you want to make particular scans of certain frames, for example, if you're making big prints. If you're digitizing negatives or copying slides using this feature, it doesn't add too much in camera, but there are additional steps you need to take in post. You need to import the files into NX Studio to merge them into one high resolution image. The software works well and isn't too much of a pain, but it would definitely slow you down if you're copying an entire roll of 35mm film, for example. All in all, it's great to have the option. It works well, and the resulting files will give you more resolution than you should ever need. This applies whether you're using it to digitize film or just regular photography work. It's just a nice feature to have. Now, one of the last things I want to touch on is some comparisons. Firstly, I know this camera is based on the FM2, but it does feel significantly bigger and probably heavier than cameras like that and the FE. It's not big by general means, but just something that I thought I'd mention in case you haven't handled one You can see in the footage compared to the FE, it's noticeably bigger. Secondly, I know some people will be wondering about this versus the ZFC. It's really up to you whether you want the full frame sensor and other features that are exclusive to the ZF. And I think that the price difference is justified. Personally, I would easily choose the ZF, but do your own research into the features that you think you'll use the most. What about compared to the Canon R6 or R6 II or Sony A7 series or other competing cameras? Again, this comes down to your preference for certain features and perhaps whether you plan to use it for professional or video work. Generally speaking though, when it comes to professional work, I think the price point, features, and build make the Nikon ZF one of the best value for money options right now. So overall, it's a great looking camera that has performance to match. The price is competitive and the strategy from Nikon to introduce this is a good one in my opinion. It fills a gap in the market that has mostly been empty. I expect to see a lot of people buying this camera and starting to use it over the next year. Sure, some of the appeal is about trendiness and aesthetics, but these things can actually encourage people to shoot more. It's not all for show either. The feature set of ZF makes it a competitive option in its own right. Film photography continues to rise in price, which means that this has come at a good time for many. It could make a good pairing to your existing film setup, or just a great standalone option to give you some of that film camera feel and experience. I really enjoyed my time with it and want to thank the guys from Nikon Australia for loaning me the camera. By the time I got to the tail end of producing this video, I already saw that a few people I know had bought one at launch. So what are your thoughts on the Nikon ZF if you have one, or if you're considering it? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and please feel free to check out the info in the description for ways you can help support the channel. I'll see you in the next video here on Pushing Film.